Hello and welcome to another episode of Mind to Mind. My name is Evelyn and I'm joined by Dr. Daniel Claiborn. Our topic of the day is the morality and psychology of war. Kindly talk to us on all our platforms. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Um, you can comment down below and ask us any question that you'd like to ask about war. How do you view war? What comes to mind when you watch some of the wars that are going on in the world right now? And don't hesitate to ask any question. We'll be using a description. We will be using an outline, which I have shared in the description down below. So feel free to follow through in everything that we'll be discussing. And thank you for joining us once again. Introduce yourself, Dr. Daniel Claiborn.
Sure.
Karibu.
Yes, we're very happy to be back. Every other Wednesday, we look forward to these programs, and we also welcome any suggestions you all may have about future topics and any questions about our previous topics. We really like to hear from you. We don't hear from you that often, so if you do want to give us some information about yourself and your questions, please do. Yes, we thought today might be a good topic to cover because of the wars that are currently happening in Ukraine and Israel. But also just because all of us are aware of the wars in our memory, going back to even World War II or the Korean War, the Vietnam War. So many innocent people die in these wars, and sometimes the wars don't seem to accomplish anything. And Evelyn was asking me just a few minutes ago as we were preparing, she was bringing up the idea that, we elect leaders to serve our interests and keep us safe and protect us and guide our countries. And yet sometimes they make decisions which put millions of us at risk, and whether it accomplishes anything or it doesn't. So anyway, we thought we might have a program about the thinking, the psychology behind war, the various ways it can be looked at. It can be looked at in a strategic way or tactically or politically or emotionally or morally. And each way of looking at war puts it in a different light. So that's how we thought of our topic. And as usual, Evelyn is going to be representing the thinking of people out there in her generation, particularly, and her country. I'm broadcasting from the United States, of course, and Evelyn is located in Kenya. So that's our program for today.
Yeah. So I think when I have come across the news, I will be honest, I don't go looking. I don't want to sit on my living room and watch the news because
Right.
it is a source of stress, and I don't feel comfortable watching um, a young child looking for their parents, they're injured, or like a devastated parent looking for a relative because they are either lost or dead under a building. I I don't like watching or even looking at. I don't know. It just makes me feel so bad to see someone who woke up in the morning going about their business and all of a sudden they are homeless. They are walking in the streets with their children without knowing where to sleep, without knowing whether they're going to have dinner, and it's not like they were in a bad place. They are just a victim of circumstances, and it's not a natural occurrence. It's not a hurricane or an earthquake that came and destroyed someone's building. It was the actions of another human being who decided that I should be homeless or that person should be homeless. And because there's a disagreement between two heads of states for
Uh-huh.
whatever, I don't find that the end justifies the means. At the end of the day, I feel like human life is more important. That's
Right.
just how I'm viewing the whole situation.
I think that that represents the way most people I know feel. They watch the news a little bit, but they have to protect themselves from it because it's so disturbing. Um, Beginning with World War II, our,
Mhm.
our methods of conducting war have been so much more destructive.
Yeah.
And you know, with uh, uh, chemical warfare and drone attacks and bombing, mass bombing,
Mhm.
including the atomic bombing of Japan. I mean,
Mhm.
modern warfare, the collateral damage, the horrible damage to ordinary people who aren't even involved in the war is so likely, as opposed to all previous wars.
Yeah.
Um, that's one of the things that I think makes it so disturbing, and also then the fact that we can all see this on television, and we're
Yeah.
not insulated from it. We don't just hear about it remotely. We can see it in real time, and you
Yeah.
see the like in Israel, the bombing of these of everyone's buildings, including hospitals and
Mhm.
and centers for the people trying to seek refuge, just getting blown away completely, and large
Mhm.
numbers of people, like in Gaza, over 1 million people were asked to move out of their city. Well,
Mhm.
there's no place to move to, and what are they going
Yeah.
to do? And all the questions Evelyn just brought up, and one of the things I feel as a psychologist most strongly about, and Evelyn mentioned this earlier in our discussion, is the effect of this kind of horror on children. This is
Yeah.
not something that just affects people when it happens, which is bad enough and often
Mhm.
kills their parents or destroys their homes, but it will really affect them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so, what is it that leads human beings to conduct these kinds of wars, which we can talk about in the beginning? And at the end, I think we might talk about what we as human beings need to do in the future to try to prevent these things from happening uh,
Yeah.
at all. So, yes, the effect on families and children is really important.
Mhm.
And for the most part, as Evelyn mentioned, these families and children are people that were just going about their daily lives and working. They're not the people who made these decisions to
Yeah.
attack one country or another um, at all. So it's just something that happens to them, like the weather, like a tornado or an earthquake, something like that, that they have
Yeah.
no control over.
Mhm. It's so sad that, I think like some of the things that were going through my mind, like when I was watching the news of what is going on, I don't know, I just like found myself empathizing with them, and I just wondered like, um I just wondered how devastating it is sometimes when, like, on a normal day you have planned something and it doesn't go like according to plan, and how devastating it is. And in comparison, like, this is now someone whose life has completely been shut, like, in a different direction, and it's like caused by people, like another human being has caused it,
Hmm.
and they don't seem like it's something that they're going to learn from anytime soon. So I like that person is now they are constantly in danger. They're not safe. You don't know, like, like you find that they will not even know how long it's going to be before they are safe.
Uh-huh.
They don't know, yeah, they might have survived at that moment, but the constant anxiety of, will it happen when I'm walking down the road? Will someone gun me down? Like, I
Uh-huh.
can't imagine the kind of anxiety like it would, they are going through right now.
Yes, that's really a
And
good point.
yeah, like even like, am I going to have somewhere to sleep? Are my children going to have food? And also also like with even the bombing of the hospital, like the way some of them were taken to hospital for, like you survived the first attack, and then now you're taken to hospital for treatment, and you feel like, oh, finally I there's some sort of safety, and then someone just comes and also bombs the hospital. Like the constant
I
alertness.
I think partly
You
what
know,
you're talking about is lack of control. These
yeah,
things are happening, and I, as a single person, I have no control over it, and there's
yeah,
no predicting what may happen next, and that does
yeah,
create a lot of anxiety.
yeah. And there's no source of security. There's nothing to give you. I think the only thing that maybe they're holding on to is like some sort of hope that maybe there will be help in the next like few days or something, or they will find some sort of rescue,
Mhm.
people who are rescuing people, or they go to a safety zone. But I can imagine like at that particular moment, like what's going on in their mind.
Uh-huh. Well, and as we watch these things, which we can do on television now, when people do come to the rescue or aid arrives, it also makes us admire those people that are,
Yeah,
humanitarians reaching out to try to help fellow human beings. So that part is inspiring and beautiful in its own way. But
yeah,
the whole context is so upsetting and sad. I thought maybe we might talk a little bit about some of the the psychology behind war. We all know these things, but I thought, and I put them on our outline just to kind of refresh our memory that of the different elements. It's like a recipe of ingredients that go into setting the stage for war to happen. There's a sense of identity that can conflict with people in some other location. Um, Conflict of cultures or religions, that's part of it. There's history between countries, let's say. There
yeah,
could be fear and grudges that are held, and feelings of revenge over historical things that have happened between those countries. Um, of course, we have to mention greed and power
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
authoritarian rulers that are much more
Mm-hmm.
likely to initiate war, like in Russia. Um, then there are wars over resources, countries
Yeah.
needing water or ocean ports or some kind of geographical advantage that they don't have, um,
Mm-hmm.
or just land, particularly in general, um,
Mm-hmm.
living space. Um, and then something I've written about before, and we've had a program about this before, we have to also think of toxic masculinity, because almost
Yeah,
all wars in human history have been decided and implemented and fought by men. And the
yeah,
decisions to go to war and to attack another country have almost always exclusively been decisions made by men. Not that
mm-hmm.
all men are toxic, but there are some aspects of masculinity that, as we talked about in our previous program, if taken to an
Mm-hmm.
extreme, can be
Yeah,
very harmful and damaging, like the need to win at all costs, the
yeah,
inability to admit mistakes, things like
Mhm.
that. There's toxic masculinity. So we have all these things from history to power to resources to cultural differences, many
Mhm.
ingredients that can go
Yeah.
into any particular war. And you can take
Mhm.
any one of the wars that in a recent memory, like Vietnam or um, the war in Ukraine right now or in Israel, and you can see some of these elements in the decision makers. As Evelyn pointed out, the average people on the street are not the ones making these decisions, but
Yeah.
there's cultural and historical background and reasons that the people who do make these decisions give for
Yeah.
going to war.
Yeah.
Um, but would the people on the street actually vote for that if they had a chance to? That's a different question. So I wanted to
Yeah.
just refresh our memory about some of the different background factors that lead to have led to war in the future, and we'll talk about how to maybe address that in the future. But those are all very real factors. Every country, every civilization feels the pressure of some of those things. Um,
Mhm.
the United States, for one thing, is lucky to be insulated from a lot of the rest of the world by oceans. And
Mhm.
so it's been protected to some extent from wars.
Mhm.
Other countries that are situated really close to each other and yet with different cultural uh, norms, like countries in Europe or the Middle East or Africa, um,
Yeah.
may be much more vulnerable because
Yeah.
there's no buffer between them. There's no protection, natural protection,
Mhm.
and yet they have serious differences and a history of conflict, maybe.
Yeah. It's so sad, like even some of the African countries here, you can find like some of the wars in some countries like the DRC, Congo, based on resources. There are people who want to be the only ones who have like Congo is very rich in minerals, like diamonds and yeah, and all sorts of minerals. So you find that there are people there who will constantly initiate war between different tribes and all that, and they will instigate different people to keep fighting against each other. But at the end of the day, like it's just a few who benefit from the resources that have been found there. We've had political wars here in Kenya where you find like one political party instigates like another their people to fight another political party so that their party can get power. And at the end of the day, you find like people, like the normal human beings, the you and I are the ones who end up dead, but these people will end up sitting in a boardroom, come up with a treaty or an agreement that is going to help them. Like the leader will end up with a deal that is going to end the war because he called the war so that they can support their team. But when it comes to gain, any kind of gain, the leader is one who gets the gain, and the rest of the people are left just in the same state. The state that they were in at the beginning of the war, and this is the same state that they are left in at the end of the war. But unfortunately, they end up losing some of their people because of the same. So, I like I, at the end of the day, when you really look at all the kinds of war that have happened in the world, they're instigated by leaders who, for some reason, are fighting over something, be it resources or greed or land or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if they sit down and they write a treaty or they come to peace, they don't end up dead. They don't end up losing anything. If there is war, they have the resources to get themselves out and find asylum in some other country. They will have the resources for security. They will have the resources for, like protecting their people and their families. They will never lack food or anything, any of the resources. They'll never sleep outside. But the normal human being, you and I, are the ones who are going to suffer at the end of the day.
Right.
In Swahili, like we have a saying, a proverb in Swahili. It says, fahari wawili wakipigana. I will translate. I will translate, Dr. Claiborn. It says, fahari wawili wakipigana, nyasi ndio huumia. So what it means, when two bulls fight, if there's a bull fight, at the end of the day, the only thing that's gonna get hurt is the grass. They will fight each other, but the grass is the one that is gonna get hurt. It's the one that's gonna get stampede on, and it might take a while before the grass over there grows. And that grass is the normal human being. And
Right.
these two bulls, the two leaders. That is what it says.
Yeah,
So
that's very well put.
yeah.
You
And
know,
what
something we. Oh, go ahead, Evelyn. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what the wise men were saying when they were saying they were giving that proverb, what they meant was that at the end of the day, like for example, even we use that even in marriage. You find like when mom and dad fight, the person who gets hurt is the child. Because at the end of the day, you both make the decision for the child. So if you are fighting in front of the children are the ones who get hurt. So if you're put in a position of leadership, you have so many people who are looking up to you for protection, for you to make the right decisions, to make sure that they don't go hungry, to make sure that you're actually taking care and safeguarding their resources, and you do not put them in a situation where they are getting hurt. But unfortunately, in the world, that doesn't happen. And most of the time, even when we are exercising our democracy and we go to vote for these people, we are hopeful that finally that we will find someone who actually cares for the people and they're going to do the right thing and everything. Not to say that anyone is perfect, but if you make a decision that is going to cause someone else's death, to be honest, I honestly do not. I don't understand that. Maybe I'm just rigid or
Hmm.
something, but I don't understand it. Especially like a lot of people. There are incidents where you have to choose like a lesser evil or something like that. But there are situations where I don't understand how you're fighting over land, but people end up dying. I don't understand it.
Well,
Yeah.
and something else we have to keep in mind is that the world, our planet, is created very unequally. There are different
Yeah.
climates, different land fertility. Um,
Mhm.
and then there's climate change over time. So conditions are always changing. And so
Yeah.
the causes or the ingredients that could cause war will always be with us. We have to we have to make a different uh, I'm not sure what
Hello.
happened there. Some
Yes. Sorry.
interference. But so human beings will have to come to a different way of handling this. Um, the world was not created in a fair way. Some countries,
Just a minute. I think I'll need to log out because I can't hear you.
okay, we'll wait for Evelyn to come back. It's amazing to me that sometimes technology works as well as it actually does. I'm always feeling lucky when uh, Zoom calls or our show work technically fine. It's nice, but there are sometimes problems. I see your face.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Anyway, I was just saying that well, we can't wait for conditions to change around the
Yeah,
world that will improve things so that we won't have wars. Conditions are always going to be challenging. Right now,
yeah,
climate change is very real, and countries that have a nice climate for growing crops now in the next 10, 20, 30 years may not. And the other thing that's continuing to happen is population is increasing. So there are more people globally that need resources and food and ability to grow crops and so on. So the conditions are always changing. So we can't wait for that to solve the problem of war. We have to change the mindset of those people Evelyn was talking about that make these decisions. And they're not the ones that are subject to the horrors of war. They're sitting in an office far away making these decisions that harm others. So we have to really work on having a different kind of people in those roles. And we'll talk about that at the end. But yes, things are just not fair and equal around the world in terms of climate, opportunities, wealth. And that always causes issues, particularly as our population grows.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think when I was growing up, I watched a show, a certain show of like I think different generations after the Vietnam War, and you find that because they were using chemical and nuclear weapons, so it ended up changing the biological effect of how some of the children were born. And there were a lot of kids who were born with defects, like on their, you find like maybe the nose did not come out the way it's supposed to come out. And you find like maybe people have like just defects. I don't know how to call them, but you find like they needed plastic surgery to try and correct and reconstruction surgery to try and correct some of the features, maybe like on their face or their arm, that did not grow in a like a normal human being kind of way. I'm really trying not to be offensive, but that's how I'm able to explain it. Anyway, so like, and I was really young, and I think the Vietnam War happened like it was a while ago. So you see, like even years and years after, that could even have been the fourth or the fifth generation after the war, but people are still paying the repercussion of something that happened a very long time ago.
Right.
So you find that if you don't watch such shows and you do not, like as a leader, if you do not like research and see the repercussion of your actions or any decision that you make and how it is going to cost different generations, or it might take years before people are able to actually get back to a normal state or even get back on course on where they would have been, then it will be hard for you to make the right choice when it comes to such decisions.
You know, one thing that you're reminding me of, Evelyn, is that and I'm thinking of the lessons learned in Vietnam. You know, the French were there for 30 years, unsuccessful. The United States went in and fought a very bloody, horrible war with bombing and chemical warfare and Agent Orange and defoliation. And then you think we would learn from things like this, but then no, we turn around and we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. So even the United States, a country I'm proud of, and I love being an American, but I mean we did not learn those lessons at all. And now we're seeing Hamas attack Israel, Russia attack Ukraine for no reason, really. And so the people who are making these decisions sometimes are not learning the lessons of history, and they aren't caring about the long-term repercussions on millions of individuals for years to come after the war is over, as Evelyn is pointing out. That doesn't persuade their thinking. That you can be here, and it's not just Israel. I mean, it's like I say, the United States has done it. France, Russia, uh, countries that are educated and have uh, democracies even uh, can forget the lessons of the past and go to war anyway. And these days it's so much more costly because of the weapons that we have are just more uh, deadly and damaging. So it's really even a worse decision to go to war now than it would have been 100 years ago or 300 years ago or whatever. Um,
You
so anyway, that's
know,
the point, Evelyn.
oh, sorry. You know what is actually, I think, really annoying about all this is that most of the time it's actually a pissing concept. I'm like, I apologize for my words, but it's a pissing contest between like two people who have very huge egos, and they want to show that, oh, you can't do this to me, so I'm gonna react like this to show you that I have bigger guns than you. And then this one is going to retaliate, and they're going to do the same thing and hurt more people. You know, another thing I don't understand is that when there is a war between when there's a war between two countries, isn't it supposed to be a war between the military guys? Why are you going for civilians? Like, why did they attack the civilians? Should, if they are trying, I'm not saying like it's going to be easier or as in it's a better decision, but I'm just wondering, like, why are you fighting someone who can't fight for themselves?
Well,
Do you
one
know?
of the things that I hear as an explanation usually, and it's happening right now with Israel and Russia, is that they uh, displace the responsibility onto someone else. So Israel is bombing and harming civilians in Gaza, but they say, well, the responsibility is on Hamas for starting this war. And the same thing with Russia attacking Ukraine. They are causing all this damage to this peaceful neighbor that they had. But if you listen to Putin, the explanation is he blames Ukraine for starting it. So one of the ways that they justify their attack is by actually shifting responsibility to some other person or other country. Usually it's the country they're attacking. They shift the responsibility to them, and then that excuses the horrible, damaging uh, attacks that they are committing. I definitely
But
I see that quite a bit. The United States did that same thing with Iraq. They accused Iraq of
but
having weapons of mass destruction when really Iraq did not. And so that justified America's attack on Iraq
mm,
rather than taking responsibility for their own decision.
but since when did two wrongs make a right?
hmm To me,
Feel like
Evelyn, that's a key,
basic,
that's a key question. Do,
yeah.
do two wrongs make a right, or do two wrongs not make a right? And you can find people on both sides of that question. Some people feel like if something's been done to me, is it right for me to do something back to that entity or that person? And other people don't feel that they see that as a much more immature way of looking at things. The two wrongs make a right. I'm glad you
Yeah,
brought.
because yeah, because saying that the reason as to why your people are suffering is because you started a war. So does it mean that you are responsible for my reaction? Because at the end of the day, I do believe that what I do, regardless of what you did to me, is my fault. What I decide to do about it is my fault. So it doesn't matter what you did to me. What I decide to do about it is my fault. So why do you? do you kill thousands of people and say that it's your fault you started it? It sounds like such a childish game. But unfortunately, a lot of people are losing their lives because they've decided to be childish about it.
Mhm. It is childish, and just like people can be immature or at different levels of maturity, so
Yeah.
can countries and governments. I should say governments, not
The
countries,
government.
governments. And so, yes, a very immature way of looking at things would be to just hit back if somebody has hit me. A more mature way of looking at something would be to take a look at the big picture and how can we solve this problem at
Yeah.
the least collateral damage to everyone. And
Yeah.
so right now you see Israel pursuing a policy of striking back as if
Hmm.
that will release the hostages, believing it will release the hostages, and other countries around the world taking a bigger picture look at this and saying, let's slow down, let's have some pauses, let's have some ceasefires, let's allow some humanitarian aid to come into the situation. But then again, those countries weren't the ones that were attacked and suffered
Yeah.
that brutal attack that Hamas did carry out on Israel. So it
Yeah.
is complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. And as much as I think, like, I've ever watched this movie called House of Cards, and I think it was the first time I ever understood like the mindsets of some of these political leaders. And some of the time it's usually it's like they're playing poker, and who has the better cards than the other person, and how they're going to get better cards than the other person.
Right. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think it's such a like it's such a selfish view on who has more cards or better cards
And
than
I
the other.
honestly think that men are more likely to think this way than women are. I think women are more conscious in general of the social welfare of the group, the welfare of
Yeah,
everyone, not just winning myself. Um,
yeah.
there are several ways, and this is in our outline too, that we can look
Mhm,
at these conflicts, and we're already talking about them. There's a
mhm,
tactical way. So, what should I do as a leader? Um, there's a kind of a historical way. What have I done before, and what has worked, and what hasn't worked? Um, there are political considerations, and these days those are very strong. For example, Putin attacking Ukraine is really probably representative of a struggle between Russia and Europe and NATO. And so the political, you can look at it politically. You
mhm,
can look at it strategically, like in the long run, if we do this or this or this, what advantage does that give us eventually? So there's that. Um, there's the emotional way of looking at it. Some
mhm,
we've been hurt, and people in our country have been injured and humiliated. So
mhm,
emotionally, I feel like having revenge and that sort of way. And then finally, there's the moral way of looking at it. And I think Evelyn was beginning to talk about that a minute ago. If you look at how to proceed in a moral way, that's much more sophisticated and mature. And it wouldn't be such a childish immediate reaction as more of an emotional or tactical response. It would be
mhm,
really more a healthier way of not just handling this particular dilemma, but creating a
mhm.
world where maybe these dilemmas wouldn't happen so often. And so
Yeah,
there just if you see two people arguing about the merits of a war, it often is that one person is coming from a tactical standpoint or a strategic standpoint, and another person's
mhm,
coming from an emotional standpoint, and another
mhm,
person's coming from a moral standpoint. And
Yeah.
those roads lead to different ends.
Mhm.
And really wise leaders, I think, would consider everything, all of those, but definitely including the moral perspective.
Yeah.
Without the moral perspective, those others can lead to tragedy and
Mhm.
great damage to people.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see people arguing, and I've been in arguments myself, where really we're not arguing about the facts so much, but we're coming from different points of view, like
Yeah.
the tactical or the strategic or the moral or the emotional, and that's where the argument is going. And right now I see people interviewing either Putin or Netanyahu, and that you can see the interviewer is asking questions from maybe a moral perspective, and
Mhm.
Netanyahu or Putin, they're answering from a tactical or strategic or emotional perspective. And
Yeah.
each perspective has validity, but
Yeah.
without the moral, more mature consideration,
Mhm.
it ends in tragedy. I think it's good. It's like your argument a minute ago, Evelyn, about when parents are arguing, children are the ones that are the victims.
Yeah.
So sometimes when parents are arguing and children are being hurt, a friend or another person or a therapist comes in and helps the parents
Mhm.
to stop their arguing in some way, and then eventually that helps the children. And it's
Yeah.
sometimes countries try to help each other. Like right now,
Yeah.
some countries are trying to help Israel kind of slow
Mhm.
down, uh, pause. Let's
Yeah.
take care of the civilians. They're trying
Mhm.
to help them because, in a way, if a country attacks another country and creates all this horrible collateral damage with civilians, that sets the stage for a future war for
Yeah.
those victims in that country that was humiliated. They're going to
Yeah.
hate that country that attacked them. And so
Mhm.
it's like can be an ongoing cycle of uh,
Yeah.
of violence.
Yeah. We have a comment
Yeah.
uh, from Nyokabi. Nyokabi Kamela. This is my friend. She's saying she's lost and loving the conversation. Do you have a question for us, Nyokabi? Anything you'd like to ask? Feel free to ask. We're discussing about the morality and psychology of war, and this is based on the current wars that are happening in the world right now. That is Israel and between Israel and Palestine, and also the Ukraine and Russia. We have some countries that are going. They have wars in Africa, and we're generally talking about like what causes them, how does it affect the people, what what is the logic behind it, and yeah, what do we learn from these situations as well. You can share with us what you think about the current wars and how does it affect you psychologically, and how do you think about it morally. Yeah. And some of the, I think one of the questions that I had is that, like, when you're a leader of a country, don't you have people around you to advise you on the best course of action when it comes to certain things, certain situations, like um, certain situations that are going on? Like for example, when the Israel government found out about the people who were killed and some of the people who were kidnapped, like by Hamas. Um, when when they are being advised on such situations, do they think about all the ways of viewing the war, and how do they come up with this with the the response to the attacker?
I think that's a really good question. And I think, well, in authoritarian states like Russia, I think
Mm-hmm.
advisors are often afraid to contradict the leader. And so the leader or the leader surrounds himself with people that are yes men that will support his direction. Um,
Yeah,
now in Israel right now, I think that's not the case. I think there are people of all different views in the Israeli government, and so it isn't the case that no one is producing different opinions. I think there's a wide variety of opinions in Israel, but in Russia right now, I think in general people would be very afraid to contradict Putin because some of his critics have mysteriously been killed or died, for
yeah,
example. In the United States, when we went to war against Iraq, mistakenly believing that they had weapons of mass destruction and they didn't, I think it was an example of a president who was surrounded by advisors who were really into power and not really humanitarian sentiments, but
yeah,
so it was. I think George Bush, our president at that time, got bad advice and bad intelligence. So it can be a variety of things. Sometimes it's the leader himself who's in it for his own self-aggrandizement and power. Other times it's poor advisors who have their own stake, maybe financially or somehow in what may happen. Um, yeah, the wisest leader, like Abraham Lincoln, one of my favorite presidents in the United States, surrounded himself with some of the people in his cabinet who were his enemies
yeah,
because he felt like he was picking the very best person for each position in the cabinet, regardless of whether they were a friend or an enemy of his, or agreed with him or they disagreed with him. And I think that's a very high level of leadership to
yeah,
have advisors of all different views that will speak the truth, no
yeah.
matter what the consequences. But many world leaders really don't go that direction, and they have advisors who generally agree with them.
And it's so unfortunate. I've seen that happen here, and some of the conversations that I've had, especially what's going on in Kenya, we may not be at war physically or this, but people are getting hurt economically, and they are struggling to even survive. And some of the conversations that I've actually listened to are people who are saying that unfortunately we choose political parties instead of leaders themselves. And if we focus on the type of leader that we are choosing, then maybe we might have a chance of choosing a leader who actually cares. But we we have given so much power to political parties, such that as long as a leader is affiliated to a certain political party, we choose them without vetting them.
Mhm.
And this is the person you're left with on the ground in these small seats. And they're the ones in parliament, they're the ones who are going to support this leader. So if they end up with, if let's say the president's party end up with more numbers, if the president wants to push an agenda, they end up all supporting him. So he doesn't have any kind of opposition to counterattack any of the decisions that he's making.
Yeah,
So if his decisions are not for the people, he won't have anyone coming to ask him questions that are going to, people who are going to actually represent the will of the people. And
I
that
think
is, we are
in,
ending up
in,
in some of these situations.
I agree with that. In authoritarian governments, the danger is the authoritarian leader and the power in that's accumulated by that person. In democracies, one of our biggest dangers is what Evelyn is speaking about right now, and that is the allegiance to a party and politics rather than any particular idea, and the overwhelming pressure to stay in power, to keep
Yeah,
the party elected, and to keep if I'm a senator or a representative in government, to keep myself elected next time.
yeah.
That's the one of the major dangers to look out for in democracy.
Yeah, and that is some of the cards that they play. So they need to have as many people in their political party elected. That way they will have the power. They will have more power on their side whenever they want to push an agenda. And unfortunately for the people, you find that when they are not whatever they're trying to push, if it's not for the people, they end up suffering. We have a comment from a question from Yokabi, and she's asking, what part can I play as an individual to counter the effects of war?
Okay, that's a great question, and that the last part of our outline, I tried to think of what people can do. What can we do to prevent this cyclic dynamic that keeps happening? And I thought of a number of things. Now, how to do them is very difficult, but here are the things that I thought of that human beings, all of us, can try to do in our lives that can kind of interrupt this war dynamic. We can promote the valuing of life over the valuing of, let's say, property. We can try to respect differences among people. We can try to embrace the idea that the good of some people is the good of all people. So if all of my neighbors can have some benefit, then I will have a benefit. We can resist conspiracy thinking. These ideas that just aren't really accurate. They're propaganda. We can resist propaganda, and we can resist discrimination among different types of people and different religions and different cultures. We can try to build relationships with one another on the ground, with just each other and in our governments. And we can encourage democracy, which I think is the best form of government, but it's not free of dangers. And one of the dangers with democracy is the need, once a party or a candidate has gotten into a position of power, the instinct is to keep it. So anyway, these are at some level in our communities and our churches and our schools and education, especially, trying to go toward these various principles, I think, is our best hope in the long run. Valuing life, respecting everybody as equal. Those are higher principles than grabbing land or subjugating a group of people that we don't like, or revenge. Those are lower level motives, but a higher level motive would be being inclusive, being egalitarian, respecting the rights of everyone, that kind of thing. Now, how we do that would be in our schools, churches, just our groups with each other, how we treat one another. I think it really starts with individual people. And then also electing people who are like that.
Yeah. And I think it's so hard. It's so hard. You find like sometimes especially during the election period, you find that it is hard for you to have a conversation about like what are the issues that we need to be tackled, or who you think is a better candidate. Like having such such conversations can actually lead you to even losing friendships, businesses, and all
Uh-huh.
that.
Yes.
Because you can even lose a client because you mentioned, or maybe you don't support their point of view on certain things.
Yes.
So I think we also have that entitlement of people agreeing with us.
Hmm.
And it beats the whole logic of what democracy means, because democracy means that you have a right to choose who you think is best. And even if they end up not being the best, you still had a right to choose them because that's what you thought at the moment. And we also, like, for example, when you choose a certain leader and they end up being terrible, and maybe like someone who knew that you voted them in, they will constantly remind you that you made a terrible decision. The reason why we're suffering is because of you and your decision and all that. And at the end of the day, I think that every individual has a right to make a choice, whether that choice is good or bad. And they have freedom. I think the whole point of democracy is the freedom to make a decision based on your perspective and
Yes.
what you think is right, and hopefully making a decision that is for the people, not necessarily about political parties. And unfortunately, that ideology or entitlement of people agreeing with you in certain situations makes it hard for even our own leaders to feel the need to make the right choices. Because if they do not have people who can keep them accountable for their actions,
Right.
or even constitutions that do not give them so much power, like some of the powers that some of our leaders have are because of how we have placed them there or written our constitutions, so that they can be kept accountable. No one person should have so much power that
Right. Yes.
they
Checks
can.
and balances. One other thing that I think I'd like to add at the end, and that is one of our challenges in our modern world is so much fake news and
Yeah,
information that we gather to make decisions, which I agree with Evelyn about the importance of all of us making choices. But right now, we have to be especially careful. There's a tremendous amount of false information, lies,
yeah,
conspiracy theories, propaganda that we are subject to now because of social media and all the different media sources that we have. And in our country, the United States, people feel much more fragmented now than they ever did before. And part of that is because of all the news outlets that are providing information that's false. And part of our education challenge is to help our students and our young people come up with the ability to discriminate actual, true, responsible information from false information and hate information and propaganda. So that's something new that we're dealing with in our modern world. Anyway, I think this has been a great discussion.
yeah.
I'll be
And
anxious to see if we have some comments or people have some thoughts that they send us in between this one and our next program.
yeah, um, I think my last point is that I think one of the things is when it comes to leadership and political parties and politics in general and whatever is going on, I think it's important for you to verify information for yourself before making decisions. Don't
Yes,
just listen to one party or the other without necessarily verifying these individuals. And sometimes it's hard because we kind of rely on the information we get to get to know our leaders, but put in more effort yourself. That way, you will not rely on someone else's perspective on choosing our leaders. And hopefully, we end up choosing better leaders who make better decisions for the people.
right. Well, thanks everybody for watching again. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I don't think we've picked our next topic yet. So if other people have ideas, please send them to us. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we will. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. If you have any questions, if you continue to watch this even during the week and you like it and you have more questions, don't hesitate to ask, and we are going to get on it right away. Thank you so much. Have a lovely week ahead. I'll see you next time.
See you next time.